Tonight, political clash. The push to extend the carbon tax pause on home heating oil fails.
Trudeau and his costly MPs have divided our country, raised our taxes, and pushed our people out into the cold.
The Conservative motion rejected as the Liberals go after the opposition leader.
He has not spoken the words climate change since he was elected, and he has no plan.
An extraordinary legal and political moment in a Manhattan courtroom.
This is a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought.
Donald Trump becomes the first former president in more than a century to take the stand in his civil fraud trial. Plus, a dazzling display across skies in the northern hemisphere.
We're going to be seeing lots of these big storms, which makes for very pretty lights in the sky.
The cosmic dance and the geomagnetic storm that made the show even more vivid.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. A showdown over carbon pricing in Canada is intensifying tonight. Two parties on opposite sides of the political spectrum joined forces in the House of Commons today to push for more carve-outs. The motion failed, but that hasn't stopped the political pressure on the Prime Minister, who is being accused of playing favorites in a part of the country where polls show he is politically vulnerable. And more of that pressure also came from Canada's premiers today. CTV's Judy Trinh leads us off.
All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
The Conservative motion to remove the carbon tax from all home heating failed, despite having support from the NDP, who wanted to send the Liberals a message.
It was really divisive to say one region gets help because they voted Liberals and other regions don't because they didn't vote Liberal. I mean, we've got to reject that.
2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister announced a 3-year pause on carbon taxes for furnace oil. 25% of Canadian homes that rely on the oil are located in Atlantic Canada.
I don't share that view that we're playing unfairly in terms of regional representation.
Que tous ceux qui s'opposent à la motion veuillent bien se lever.
The Liberals defeated the motion with the help of the Bloc Québécois. Quebec has its own carbon policy, so the Bloc rejected expanding the tax break to other regions.
Is an idea which goes against the best interest of the whole planet.
That only raised the ire and rhetoric of the Conservative leader.
What we learned is that he's now got a new carbon tax coalition with the separatists to divide our country.
But the premiers are united in their calls for fairness and more carve-outs on other home heating sources like natural gas.
We do think that there should be a similar consideration given to the people of Manitoba to get us through this period of economic pain.
The debate isn't going away anytime soon. This week, the NDP will table a motion on cutting the GST from all forms of home heating, while the Conservatives want to fight the next election on removing the carbon tax altogether. But Omar, the Tories haven't said how they'll reduce emissions.
All right, CTV's Judy Trinh in Ottawa. And as Judy just mentioned, the message from many premiers today was that people are struggling right across the country and that any break on carbon pricing should apply to all Canadians.
All this is doing is just causing unfairness, making life less affordable, and really harming our most vulnerable as we get into the winter season.
Up until now, largely has been somewhat fairly applied across the nation. I don't think anyone can say this today.
I think they should just get rid of the carbon tax and work with the provinces on something that would actually help to preserve our planet.
BC Premier David Eby wants Ottawa to extend subsidies on heat pumps and even brought a prop T-shirt with him. Also at the meeting in Halifax is CTV's chief political correspondent Vashi Kapelos. Vashi, a rare united front from the premiers on this issue. How much pressure does it put on the Prime Minister?
I think, Omar, actually, it does up the pressure considerably on the Prime Minister, and I kind of have a really specific reason for arriving at that conclusion. The Prime Minister, the federal government, they're used to backlash on their climate policy, and particularly on the carbon tax, from their conservative foes. So from premiers in Alberta and Saskatchewan, some other conservative premiers across the country, and of course, the federal Tories. What they aren't used to is people who are normally politically aligned with them on climate policy, like BC's Premier David Eby or Manitoba's NDP Premier Wab Kinew, or the federal NDPs going up against them. And that is what has happened in this case. They have kind of all joined in, particularly the premiers here, unanimously. They used that word in the communique, unanimously, to call on the federal government to expand this carbon tax carve-out to other heating sources. So I do think that considerably ups the pressure on the federal government and even on the Prime Minister specifically to do just that. The problem? They've really dug in. The Prime Minister says there are no more carve-outs coming, no way, no how. And so he set himself up for a really, I think, politically challenging time. It remains to be seen whether he will actually bend or blink again. The pressure is immense. So far, though, he isn't budging. Omar?
All right, CTV's Vashi Capellos in Halifax. Hundreds of Canadians are still trapped in Gaza, even though the border crossing with Egypt reopened today. Global Affairs says it's in contact with more than 600 Canadians, permanent residents and family members in Gaza, but it's still not clear when they can get out. The Gaza Health Ministry now says more than 10,000 people have been killed in the Hamas-run territory. CTV's Heather Butts on the battles taking place on the ground, with a major city now surrounded.
The relentless bombing pounding down on parts of Gaza. The IDF says it has severed the northern section from the rest of the besieged territory. Gaza City now encircled by Israeli troops, expected to move in within 48 hours.
So now it becomes a building-to-building fight where Israel is going to go after and destroy whatever Hamas fighters are in that area.
That combat includes another challenge, the threat coming from below, Hamas fighters bursting out of tunnels, mounting ambushes on IDF soldiers.
They're coming out, they're shooting you, going back to the tunnel, and then running to another tunnel.
The death toll now past 10,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Still, during an interview with ABC News, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there will be no ceasefire without the release of hostages.
There is no way to defeat terrorists embedded in a civilian population without going as targeted a way as you can against the terrorists. But there will be, unfortunately, these civilian casualties. We'll do, again and again, I say it, we'll do everything in our power to reduce that.
After being closed for 2 days, the Rafah crossing reopened, allowing the passage of some foreign passport holders and medical evacuees. This Palestinian Canadian has lost 25 members of her extended family in the fighting and says Ottawa needs to call for a ceasefire and do more to help people get out.
Right now, it seems they're more aligned with Israel's right to defend itself than protecting Canadians. I mean, this is a responsibility that Canada needs to step up and help protect and bring Canadians home.
The Gaza Border Authority has said only those on pre-approved lists would be allowed through. It's unclear if any Canadians are on those lists. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. Canada is investigating a fatal explosion at its High Commission in Nigeria today that killed at least 2 people. A diesel tank exploded while maintenance workers were servicing generators. Global Affairs has closed the mission indefinitely. All 12 Canadian diplomats posted in Abuja are safe. For the first time in more than 100 years, an ex-U.S. president has testified in court in his own defense. Donald Trump's searing exchanges on the stand included shots at the judge, who warned the Republican frontrunner not to turn the trial into a political rally. CTV's Vanessa Lee on the legal showdown.
A defiant Donald Trump defended his wealth and empire today, denouncing his civil fraud trial as a political witch hunt.
Because it's a scam, and this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed.
On the stand, Trump lashed out against the judge. As he sidestepped questions and went off on tangents, the judge grew frustrated, warning this is not a political rally, and told his lawyers, "I beseech you to control him if you can. If you can't, I will."
It's more a political show on the political opportunities to get more people to agree with them that this is an hoax, a way of trying to get people to actually attack his integrity and attack his values.
The judge agreed the Attorney General has already proved her case on the key issue of fraud, determining Trump overvalued his assets to get favorable treatment on bank loans. She is seeking $250 million in damages and wants to bar Trump from doing business in New York and dissolve his companies.
But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters are the facts and the numbers. And numbers, my friends, don't lie.
Trump admitted today to adjusting some property valuations, but insisted his net worth is far greater than financial statements. He has denied any wrongdoing. The allegations cut to the heart of the brand he has spent decades crafting, a name synonymous with success and wealth.
Ivanka Trump is set to testify on Wednesday. This civil trial does not threaten to send Trump to prison, unlike the 4 criminal trials he faces next year as he campaigns to regain the presidency. Omar.
All right, Vanessa, thanks. And joining us now from New York is political analyst Eric Ham. Eric, the U.S. presidential election is a year out. What will be the fallout of this for Trump's campaign, if any at all?
Actually, Omar, there will be no fallout. In fact, Donald Trump has put this legal issue on a campaign footing. And what we are seeing as he rails against a judge, he rails against the legal system in real time in an actual courtroom, this is going to be rocket fuel for his campaign. And we are seeing now, not only are the polls showing that he is leading, particularly in key battleground states, but what took place today with Donald Trump actually facing off against a judge, that is going to embolden his supporters. It is going to embolden his campaign. And it is just the boost that he needs as he heads into the all-important primary states of Iowa and New Hampshire, which will be voting just in a few months.
All right, Eric, thank you so much for this tonight. Canada's highest court made a historic appointment today. For the first time in its 148 years, the majority of the bench will be women. Alberta's Mary Moreau was officially confirmed as a judge on the Supreme Court today and replaces Russell Brown, who retired in June. Police in BC are searching for a high-risk sex offender with a history of targeting young boys. It's been more than 48 hours since Randall Hopley failed to return to his halfway house, sparking the manhunt and a nationwide warrant for his arrest. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Melanie Nagy has the latest.
A halfway house near Vancouver's gritty downtown east side is where Randall Hopley, a notorious child sex offender, was living when he disappeared.
This has created a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety in the community, and we believe that he took deliberate steps to disappear.
According to police, Hopley told people he was heading to a nearby thrift store on Saturday, but instead of shopping, he cut off his electronic monitoring bracelet and vanished.
When we found out that Hopley had skipped out from his halfway house, we took immediate action.
A Canada-wide warrant was issued and a search launched, but this isn't the first time the 58-year-old disappeared. In 2011, Hopley was the focus of one of the biggest manhunts in BC's history after kidnapping a 3-year-old boy from his home. He eventually returned the child unharmed, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 6 years.
Anyone who has a 4-year-old at home is full of anxiety. This is someone who has repeatedly demonstrated that he is profoundly dangerous to children.
Hopley served his full prison term for the abduction and was placed on a long-term supervision order. But according to court documents, he didn't comply.
They are a significant risk to the communities.
Kashid was a police chief and BC's former Solicitor General.
He can be held in custody and ought to have been held in custody.
With Hopley's criminal history and his alleged failure to follow supervision rules, Heed believes he should have remained in jail while waiting for his court date.
There is absolutely no way this individual should have been out in a halfway house in neighborhoods.
Hopley was expected in court today to answer to alleged violations linked to his supervision order. Police believe he fled the halfway house to avoid that appearance. Omar?
All right, Melanie, thank you. Coming up, a harrowing escape.
All of a sudden, my car within seconds just filled with black smoke.
An Ontario mother of 3 saved from a burning vehicle. An incredible story of survival out of Ontario tonight. A 32-year-old woman from Hamilton was pulled out of her car by strangers just moments before it went up in flames. Here's CTV's Sean Leathong with the dramatic details.
As her car sat burning on the side of the 401 Saturday night, Jamie Lee Mitchell was in shock. Today, as she watches the video, she can't help but think,
one more minute, I would have sat in that car if those people didn't come out and help me. I wouldn't have gotten out.
The 32-year-old mother of 3 was on her way from Guelph to work in Toronto around 8:30. She just dropped off her 6-year-old son. She noticed cars honking, trying to get her attention. Mitchell pulled over.
All of a sudden, my car within seconds just filled with black smoke. Black smoke, and then I started feeling dizzy.
Mitchell tried desperately to exit the vehicle, climbing out the passenger window. She was helped by a husband and wife who had been honking their horn, having seen the fire underneath the car.
As I fell out of my car, finally getting out the door, they were just right there and just picked me up and grabbed my stuff and just said, "Run, run, we gotta go back, run."
Calling 911, they stood, watching. Small explosions, the tires, the engine. In less than 5 minutes, fire completely engulfing the car. She got out just in time.
If I would have been in there, then I wouldn't have made it. And my kids would not have a mom.
Fire crews arriving soon after, knocking down the fire. Today, the spot along the highway in the eastbound lanes just before Highway 6 South show the aftermath. Mitchell says of the couple who helped, one was an off-duty OPP officer out of Aurelia who had been returning from a cheer competition with their kids. The cause of the fire is unknown. Shantley Thong, CTV News.
Picket lines popped up all across Quebec today as more than 420,000 public sector workers staged a one-day walkout. They're angry over the provincial government's latest contract offer.
We are paid peanuts and we're told constantly that we're not working hard enough.
It's not worth it for people to work here anymore.
The job action affecting schools, hospitals, and social services created a headache for parents dropping off their kids. The 4 unions representing workers are threatening more strikes if there's no progress at the bargaining table. Still ahead, the heart of Canadian communities.
The veterans fought for us. We should, keep this Legion going.
The struggle to survive and the risk of closing forever. Veterans across Canada are facing a desperate battle to preserve what has become a social lifeline in communities nationwide. Many Legions are struggling to keep the lights on, facing mounting costs and dwindling membership. Here's CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver.
Since the 1940s, the Montgomery Legion has been a community staple, providing a place of comfort and support for veterans and their families.
A safe haven for people to come in, have fun, relax, enjoy, not worry about outside trouble.
But this safe space is struggling. Membership is declining, volunteers are harder to find, and costs are rising.
It's frustrating because sometimes you just throw up your hands in disgust and say, oh, what do we do? And then you have a successful karaoke night, or you have a celebration of life from a member that's long past, a long-time member, and it restores the energy.
Now that energy is going towards fundraising for a new elevator. It broke in February. The cost to fix it, $100,000. But without it, private groups are hesitant to book the space, and older veterans are forced to stay home.
You can imagine the loss we've had. Because if we're not accessible, they don't come. And then once people leave, it's hard to bring them back.
This financial pressure is being felt at some other Legions too, still recovering from COVID closures. So from raffles to private parties and side hustles like meat pie fundraisers, branches are working every day to raise money and reach further into the community.
We just don't have the veterans. My generation, which is early 60s on, they're not joining.
But relying on an older demographic makes it harder to cover big bills like utilities. In Edmonton, keeping the lights on costs about $16,000 a month.
It's very stressful. It keeps the manager asking where we're going to find the money.
But while some say they're struggling, the Royal Canadian Legion says most branches are thriving, seeing growing membership and savings.
The veterans fought for us. We should, keep this Legion going.
A desire to keep a special space open for those honored on Remembrance Day. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
And we hope you'll join us for our coverage on Remembrance Day, live from Ottawa, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. A Quebec couple will never forget this year's Halloween. They hit a jackpot for treats, quite literally. When Jean Larocque showed his winning lotto ticket to his wife Catherine, she thought it was a trick.
He said, "Oh, you've got to come see, I won." And I said, "Oh, yeah, Jean, I'm baking. Leave me alone." And after all, he was shaking, he was white, he was sweating. And I says, "Well, I'm going to go see what the problem is." And we checked the ticket 4 times, maybe.
It certainly was the real deal, and the pair is now $55 million richer. Jean then slept with the ticket in the pocket of his pajamas before they could cash it in. First order of business, a trip to let it all sink in. Perfect way to celebrate. After the break.
It never gets old.
The Worldwide Light Show like no other. A dazzling display across North America and Europe last night as the Northern Lights lit up and danced across the sky. Making the display even more sensational this time was a kind of cosmic cannonball. As CTV's Alison Bamford tells us, the shows might get even brighter in the coming months.
A show some were lucky enough to catch and others even luckier to photograph. Vivid images of Sunday's Northern Lights danced across China, Europe, the U.S., and parts of Canada.
I've been photographing and chasing aurora for over 15 years, and it never gets old. I go out there, and I'm just like a little kid smiling every time I see it.
Experts say the phenomenon is a result of a geomagnetic storm, which happens when the sun shoots off solar particles that end up hitting the Earth's magnetic field.
When you see the Northern Lights, what you're seeing is our planet like destroying these rays that would otherwise absolutely destroy us.
The bigger the storm, the better the lights and a bigger viewing area. Sunday's storm bringing rare sightings as far south as Ukraine and northern Italy. Some areas seeing red, while others blue and green.
Luck of the draw. It's all a matter of your atmosphere. Reds tend to be associated with more nitrogen discharges. Greens more associated with oxygen discharges. Those are our 2 principal gases in the atmosphere.
Experts say we can likely expect to see more of these shows as the sun enters its peak storm season of an 11-year solar cycle.
And we are just getting into what's called a solar maximum. So we can anticipate that over the next year or so, we're going to be seeing lots of these big storms, which makes for very pretty lights in the sky.
Scientists say the last solar maximum was a bit of a letdown, which is why some anticipate this peak could pack more of a punch. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
Certainly beautiful. Nature is full of impressive gifts. That's a snapshot of this Monday for all of us at CTV National News. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Canadians have turned to CTV National News for more than 60 years.
And now there's a new national newscast at 5:30.
It's more of the news you trust.
More of the experience you rely on.
Watch Canada's #1 national news now at 5:30 and 11.